Listen closely. The most critical negotiation of your life isn't happening in a boardroom. It's not with your competitors, not even with your closest allies. It's the one you're having with yourself, right this second. That silent conversation in your mind has already determined your ceiling, whether you break through it or remain confined by it. And here is the undeniable reality. If you continue the same internal dialogue, your external world will remain unchanged. But starting now, for the next 72 hours, you will begin transforming that voice. You will speak with authority, with clarity, with unshakable conviction. Because when you alter how you speak to yourself, you rewire your mental circuitry. When you rewire your mental circuitry, you shift your mental habits. And when you shift your mental habits, you create a new reality. This isn't just inspiration. This is neuroscience. This is the framework for installing a new operating system in your mind, one that builds the prosperity, personal authority, and unbreakable self-belief you were destined for. So lean in, because the next 3 days are not accidental. They are the foundation of your new existence. Every morning, before your feet even touch the floor, a process is triggered. Your mental computer boots up. That internal narrator begins its broadcast, softly or sometimes screaming, about your identity, your potential, and your limits. And here is the truth most never grasp. That voice is not an impartial observer. It is not static. It is the chief engineer of your entire world. Let that sink in. The phrases you repeat in your mind are not casual thoughts. They are direct commands. Your brain receives them as executive orders, and your physical being complies without debate. If you awaken and declare, "I'm drained, I can't manage this," you have just programmed your entire system for a day of fatigue and defeat. But if you awaken and state, "I am energized, I command this day," your neural network ignites, your body aligns with vitality, and your entire reality shifts direction. This isn't mystical thinking. This is the law of the mind. Every repeated thought forges a new connection in your brain's wiring. Every word you utter carves a channel into your subconscious operating system. Napoleon Hill defined this as autosuggestion, the deliberate practice of feeding your mind with thoughts that build your empire rather than thoughts that sabotage it. But here is the crisis. The majority never seize control of this internal broadcast. They operate on a default program. They recycle last year's insecurities into today's truth. They utter things like, "Money avoids me," "I lack the courage," "I'm destined to fall short." And because the subconscious cannot distinguish between a practiced thought and an absolute fact, it accepts these statements as its programming. Picture a woman who tells herself, "I'm terrible in social situations. I always get awkward." She plays that record for a decade. Eventually, just entering a crowded room makes her heart race, her palms dampen, her mind go blank, because she trained her brain to anticipate social failure. Now envision another woman who affirms, "I am charismatic, I am engaging, my presence puts others at ease." Initially, it feels like a performance, but she repeats it with feeling, day after day. Her neural pathways begin to reorganize, her physiology starts to respond in a new way, and the day comes when she walks into a room and instead of anxiety, she exudes magnetic calm. That is the chasm between being a prisoner of your inner voice and becoming its master. Understand this. Success does not begin with a bank account. It does not begin with a lucky break. It doesn't even begin with raw skill. It begins with the private counsel you hold inside your own head every single day. Napoleon Hill famously wrote, "Whatever the mind can conceive and believe, it can achieve." But here is the missing link. You cannot believe if you are continuously affirming the contradiction. Belief is forged through repetition, through daily self-dialogue that instructs your subconscious, "This is my identity, this is my destiny, this is my truth." Imagine your mind as fertile ground. If you sow seeds of hesitation, worry, and lack, you will reap a harvest of struggle and stagnation. But if you plant seeds of certainty, faith, and persistence, you will yield a yield of opportunity and expansion. The earth does not debate, it simply yields what you have planted, and your subconscious functions with the same exact obedience. Here is the staggering data. Research indicates we process between 60,000 and 70,000 thoughts each day, and an overwhelming 90% of them are identical to the thoughts we had the day before. This means if you do not change your self-talk, you are trapped in a loop. You are rewatching the same internal film reel over and over, praying for a different outcome. This is why these 72 hours are non-negotiable. They shatter the cycle. They hijack the default program. They offer you a window to reprogram your internal narrative before it hardwires your future. Let's get tactical. Suppose you're facing financial pressure. If your self-talk sounds like, "I'm trapped in lack," "I'll never be prosperous," "Money is my enemy," then your subconscious will labor tirelessly to keep you in scarcity. But if you begin to declare, "I am a master of my finances. I attract wealth-creating opportunities. Every day my financial intelligence grows," you begin to activate different neural circuits. Your mindset shifts, your choices transform, and incrementally your reality begins to align with your words. The same principle applies to relationships. If you keep repeating, "I am unworthy of love," "I always get hurt," "I don't deserve loyalty," you will attract partners who validate that narrative. But if you tell yourself, "I am deserving of deep connection," "I am a prize in any relationship," "I command absolute respect," you begin to carry yourself differently. Your posture changes. You speak with newfound authority. And suddenly the people you draw into your life reflect the standard you have declared within. This isn't sorcery. It is self-talk crystallizing into self-concept, and self-concept turning into action.
So, here is your mission. Starting today, you will become intensely aware of the language you use with yourself. Every time you catch your mind murmuring, "I can't handle this," you will instantly replace it with, "I am equipped for this." Every time it says, "This is impossible," you will answer, "Solutions appear for me." And every time it hisses, "I'm not worthy," you will proclaim, "I am inherently worthy." At first it will feel artificial. It will feel strained. This is natural. But recall, the old self-talk felt authentic only because you rehearsed it for a decade. In the same way you built those deep ruts of thought, you can now pave new, empowering highways. Think of it like blazing a new trail through a dense forest. The more you walk it, the more defined it becomes. Your self-talk is carving new superhighways in your brain. And with each repetition, they become more dominant until they become your new automatic route. Here is the empowering news. You do not need a decade to witness a shift. You can initiate it in just 3 days. Because when you command your self-dialogue with intention, your brain begins adapting immediately. Your subconscious operating system is waiting for your instructions. It is waiting for your clear voice. And the only question is, what commands will you issue? If you've ever questioned why your life feels like a repeating pattern you can't escape, the explanation is straightforward. It is encoded in the way you communicate with yourself. Most people are not defeated by external forces. They are overthrown by the internal regime. Consider this. No one needs to tell you that you're not capable. You are already the one broadcasting that message. No one needs to predict your failure. You've already mentally rehearsed your defeat 1,000 times. The most brutal confinement is not built of steel and concrete. It is built of the repeated phrases you murmur in your own mind. Let's be raw. How many times have you uttered things like, "I'll never escape this paycheck-to-paycheck cycle"? "I don't have the genetics to be successful." "The universe is against me." Perhaps you don't even voice it aloud. Perhaps it's just a fleeting thought before you pitch an idea, or when you consider a bold leap. And before you even take the first step, that voice has already persuaded you to stand down. This is why Napoleon Hill issued warnings about negative autosuggestion. He knew that every phrase we repeat, whether constructive or destructive, gets implanted into the subconscious. And the subconscious does not reason. It does not judge. It simply executes. Your mind is like a sophisticated biocomputer. It doesn't care if you install a virus or a powerful program. It will run whatever code you input. And tragically, most people spend their entire lives installing malware. Doubt, anxiety, justification, limitation. Then they are perplexed when their reality is full of system errors. But here is the twist. You did not develop this habit in isolation. Since childhood, you have been absorbing the scripts of others. Caregivers, educators, peers, society. Perhaps you heard, "You're not the sharpest tool in the shed," or "We're just not a wealthy family," or "Be practical, stop dreaming so high." Over time, those external scripts were downloaded as your own internal operating system. And without your conscious awareness, you began self-sabotaging, replaying those old files as if they were undeniable truth. Imagine a young man who grew up hearing, "You're not a leader, you're a follower." He carries that programming into his career. Every time a leadership opportunity arises, his inner voice replays, "Stay in your lane, you'll be exposed." So he never steps up, not because he lacks the ability, but because his programming forbids it. Or consider a woman who experienced a setback in her first business venture. That single event loops in her mind like a corrupted file. You're not an entrepreneur. You don't have the it factor. The next time a viable opportunity emerges, she doesn't pursue it, not because she lacks skill, but because she has preloaded a program of failure. Do you see the mechanism? The adversary is not out there. The adversary is your own outdated programming. And the most tragic part is that most are completely unaware of the code running in the background. They think, "This is just my personality." They say, "I'm just a realist." But they are not describing reality. They are authoring it with every repeated thought. Because your words crystallize into your beliefs solidify into your habits, and your habits engineer your destiny. This is the core reason so many remain stagnant. They awaken with the same negative self-dialogue, which triggers the same emotional states, which drives the same actions, which produces the same disappointing results. It's not a curse, it's faulty coding. Let me share a fundamental law. Your subconscious cannot distinguish between a truth and a lie. If you command yourself every day, "I am weak," your brain accepts it as a core setting. But if you command yourself every day, "I am powerful," even before your conscious mind fully accepts it, your brain also accepts it and begins reconfiguring your entire system to make it your reality. This is why top performers, athletes, CEOs, innovators, use affirmations not as naive optimism, but as cognitive conditioning. They operate on the principle that to triumph externally, you must first achieve victory in the internal command center. Here is your reality assessment, right now. Your self-dialogue is either your most valuable asset or your most toxic liability. It is either coding you for a life of victory or a life of defeat. And tragically, the majority, without realizing it, are running a virus that guarantees loss. But you are not the majority. You would not be listening to this if you were resigned to mediocrity. You are here because a part of you knows the old programming must be deleted so the new, powerful you can be installed. And the best news is, you do not require decades of analysis or perfect conditions. You require 72 hours of conscious, deliberate, intentional self-command. 3 days of auditing every instruction you give yourself and shifting it towards authority, not victimhood. This focused start can break the loop. Because the instant you stop reinforcing your limits and start reinforcing your potential, your entire system begins to upgrade. Your brain rewires, your mental energy rises, your self-belief expands, and suddenly opportunities that were once invisible to your old programming begin to appear on your radar. Remember this, you do not fail in life because of who you are. You fail because of who you keep commanding yourself you are not. And from this moment forward, that cycle terminates. Over a century ago, Napoleon Hill uncovered a principle so potent it became the cornerstone of modern achievement philosophy. He named it autosuggestion. And while the term may sound academic, its application is profoundly simple. The thoughts you install in your mind, particularly those you repeat with emotional intensity, will ultimately shape your destiny. Autosuggestion is not fantasy. It is not passive wishing. It is the deliberate act of programming yourself with purpose, feeding your subconscious the precise instructions you demand it to execute.
Envision your subconscious as the engine room of a colossal ship. The captain on the bridge, your conscious mind, gives the orders. The crew below deck, your subconscious, follows them without hesitation. They do not pause to question if the orders are logical or not. They simply carry them out. Your self-dialogue is the command you broadcast on that bridge every single day. If the captain shouts, "We are heading for icebergs, full speed ahead," the crew doesn't debate. It sets the course directly into the danger. But if the captain declares, "We are navigating toward abundance, vitality, and mastery," the crew aligns the entire ship's systems to make that heading a reality. This is why Napoleon Hill insisted that all riches begin with a state of mind. Every fortune, every innovation, every great legacy starts as a single thought, charged with faith and repeated until it becomes the new default program. Let's make this tangible. Imagine an aspiring entrepreneur. If his daily self-command is, "I'll never make it, I don't have the connections, I'm not clever enough," then autosuggestion is active, but it's working against him. He is programming his subconscious to filter out opportunities, to ignore solutions, to sabotage his own progress. Now imagine the same individual applying autosuggestion correctly. Each morning, he repeats with burning conviction, "I am resourceful. I attract strategic allies and valuable opportunities. My vision materializes through my focused action." At first, his conscious mind may resist, but through relentless repetition, his subconscious begins to accept the new code. His awareness opens to new possibilities. He starts to see connections he ignored before. His decisions align with his words, and gradually, his external reality begins to mirror his internal programming. This is the immutable law of the mind. What you consistently suggest to yourself, you will eventually accept as truth. What you accept as truth, you will act upon. And what you act upon, you will inevitably become. Hill understood this long before fMRI machines provided the proof. Today, neuroscientists call this neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to reorganize itself through repeated thought and experience. But Hill didn't need a lab to see the evidence. He witnessed it in the lives of titans like Andrew Carnegie, Henry Ford, and Thomas Edison. Every one of them utilized the power of focused thought and deliberate autosuggestion to transmute abstract ideas into tangible empires. Here is what is crucial. Autosuggestion only works when you fuse repetition with genuine emotion. If you mumble, "I am a leader," like a timid question, your subconscious will ignore the command. But if you state, "I am a leader, I am decisive, I inspire action," with power, with intensity, with visceral feeling, your subconscious activates. It logs the command as a high-priority instruction and begins weaving it into the fabric of your identity. This is why, for the next 3 days, you will not just recite empty words. You will speak with emotional fuel. You will declare them in the morning with your hand over your heart. You will walk with purpose in the afternoon as you affirm them. You will review them at night with a feeling of gratitude, because the subconscious responds when the command is delivered with emotional voltage. Napoleon Hill also issued a critical warning about the inverse. Autosuggestion works whether you use it intentionally or not. If you repeat, "I can't, I'm inadequate, this is hopeless,"
You're still programming your subconscious, just in the wrong direction. Every limiting belief is a negative autosuggestion repeated so many times it feels like truth. But here is the liberation. The moment you comprehend that self-dialogue is programming, you reclaim your authority as the programmer. You no longer leave your mind to chance. You stop letting fear and doubt dictate the commands. Instead, you step into the role of the captain. You begin to speak on purpose. You begin to suggest to yourself the reality you want, not the one you fear. And that's why these 3 days are so critical. For the first time, you'll use autosuggestion the way Napoleon Hill intended it, to deliberately rewire your subconscious and direct it toward your definite chief aim through persistent application. Envision this. For 3 days, you become the master of your internal narrative. Every word you speak to yourself becomes a brick in the foundation of a new identity. By day 3, you're not just saying new words, you're beginning to believe them. And once belief takes hold, action follows naturally. This is not theory. This is not hype. This is a law. Autosuggestion is happening in your life, whether you control it or not. The only question is, will you keep programming yourself for limitation, or will you finally program yourself for greatness through consistent daily practice?